Hello and welcome back to another episode of Mr. V's Camping Chair Chat. My name is Mr. V and I'm currently sat in a virtual camping chair on one of the boats in the Miami fake marina. We have just had a bumper Miami Grand Prix weekend, many things to talk about this weekend. And so I am once again in the kind of like speed recording setup. I would have, taken the camping chair somewhere, but we have got a lot to talk about. It is already midday on a Monday as I record this, so I thought we'd sit here. It means I'm not on a camera that stops recording every half an hour. We can just roll through and discuss all the many news and storylines surrounding the 6th round of the 2025 Formula 1 Championship at the Miami International Autodrome. As always, we're going to go through this thing kind of chronological order, start with some of the news stories of the week before we got to on-track action, then talk through all the things that happened with the drivers out in their cars. It was a sprint weekend, which means you've got sprint quali, those are two different things, and then the final race. I'm not going to talk through every single session of sprint qualifying, don't worry, I'm not a sadist. But yeah, we have had many things happening on track this weekend, and categorized by being basically a partially wet weekend, on and off rain showers, well not just showers, quite significant rain, particularly on Saturday here, meant things were shaken up. We had changeover sessions in the sprint going from wet to dry. We had threats of rain in the race. We had session times all thrown everywhere. Nothing in Formula 1 got cancelled, but we had F1 Academy, I think, was cancelled on Sunday morning, or before the Grand Prix on Sunday. So it was a shaken up weekend. It was a chaotic weekend. And as with the past few years in Formula 1, it seems that Miami is one of these places where lots of news happens. I was discussing this on stream. You may notice there's a few weekends in the year when lots of things are announced for the future of Formula 1, be that new contracts, new overall sponsors for the sport, even changes for driver contracts, drivers signed to new teams. It seems that those always focus around a few key dates in the calendar, and it definitely seems that Miami has become one of those. I do believe part of the reason of that is Miami is one of the billionaire hubs of the world. In America, I guess it's one of the kind of big three, New York, LA, and Miami, and it's the only one of those three that has a race. So it stands to reason that lots of the very high up, very influential people in Formula 1 and in some of the key sponsors live, or at least have houses in Miami. And so it checks out that this is one of the weekends where lots of these groups of people all meet together to discuss things, Formula 1 and the future of the sport, key sponsorships, deals, go out to a fancy dinner and organize a contract extension for your race, that kind of thing. So it definitely seems Miami has become one of those weekends where we get a lot of news, and we also get a lot of special things with one-off sponsors. We had a Lego race, which was really good actually. I'll discuss that, but we'll go through it in order. That was on Sunday morning. Just lots of things like this. Miami has become one of these jam-packed weekends, let's put it that way. So as always, starting with news stories of the week before we get to Formula 1. There were more than just this, but there's kind of too many to talk about. One small thing you may have heard of, just a minor little thing, Max Verstappen has produced a child. So on Thursday, I don't actually know where the child was born, so I don't know what time zone they're in, but basically on Thursday evening, Friday morning, it was confirmed that Max Verstappen and Kelly Piquet have had their first child together, named Lily. That's all the information we have. We don't know if it's Lily Verstappen, we don't know if it's Lily Piquet, we don't know anything else. But they put out an Instagram post welcoming their new daughter to the world. Very nice. Very lovely. Max missed his media duties on the Thursday, but he did not miss any on-track action. He was there for Friday. Obviously, he's got his own private jet, so he can get around quite quickly. Also, yeah, Max Verstappen hates media duties that much that he will go to as extreme lengths as producing a child just so he doesn't have to talk to reporters for 30 minutes. And that shows you the lengths of his dedication to never saying anything. Yeah, also massive congratulations to them. Probably will be some people already heralding Lily as the first woman to ever win a Formula One driver's title. This child will obviously be 18 in 2043. So, it's not going to happen just yet, but it's a good position to be in with one of the greatest of all time as your father. If they were to put Lily in a kart and get them racing early on, it's a great position to be in, isn't it? So you never know. But yeah, excellent stuff. Newborn child, as I said, if they do get into racing, will be 18 in 2043. But to keep you company in the meantime until then, you've got the Miami Grand Prix, because it's been extended for a 16-year contract extension until 2041. That's a long time. That is a long time for a race that is widely regarded as being a bit mid. If only someone would make a video talking about the shortcomings of this track around the car park of the Hard Rock Stadium and some realistic changes that could be made to improve the racing. If only someone would make that video. That sounds like it would be very interesting. But yeah, obviously this is not regarded as one of the best tracks in Formula One. It has the propensity for good racing, and we had some exciting sessions this weekend. I do feel like that was helped along mostly by the rain, and also Max Verstappen being a god amongst drivers. But, it's not been entirely boring. We've now had 4 Grand Prix in Miami, and this one was good, and I feel like... Which one was it? The first one? Or maybe 2024 was kind of fine, but a couple of them have been absolute stinkers. Yeah, I think they should change the track personally if they're going to be keeping it around for that long. And it's so easy to do because it's all open space, entirely owned by the same people. It's not like it's public roads, which are incredibly hard to change. It's not even like it's a permanent track where they would need to get, an extension, like buy some more land off to the side of the track in order to build a different layout. It's a car park. You can just make your squiggly line, do a slightly different squiggly line in the car park to improve the flow of this place and improve the raceability. Hopefully in this 16-year span, we do see some changes to this track, because I think without rain here, we're going to have many, many more boring races to come. But Miami is sticking around for the foreseeable, for a while. I think some people are asking if it's the longest contract extension ever. I don't think so. Or at least I think similar ones have existed in the past. I want to say, back in the day, back in like 2010 or 2012, because the British Grand Prix, there was some discussion at the time of making some changes to Donington and, making a new track layout there, and then maybe having it alternate between Silverstone and Donington. Obviously, that didn't come to pass. We have not been back to Donington Park since the early 90s. But when that was basically called off and said, no, we're sticking at Silverstone, Silverstone got a contract extension then, and I think that might have been 20 years. It was like a huge, long deal at the time. Obviously, Silverstone is one of those ones that seems to be quite low risk for like dropping off the calendar, and they have since renegotiated that contract, I guess, to get a different annual rate, because obviously each track has to pay a fee to Formula One, which is different. It's unique for every track, so some of the newer ones pay enormous amounts of money, some of the Middle Eastern races, where some of the European ones have, let's say, a legacy arrangement. I think maybe Monaco pays one of the lowest rates to Formula One, but it's so famous as an event that they've got a lot of political swing to keep it there. Anyway, so Miami's sticking around. I guess one other piece of news for this weekend, something you may have noticed on track, is a couple special liveries. Special livery watch for the weekend. We had Sauber. They said they had a special livery, but you wouldn't have noticed if no one told you. So obviously the standard Sauber livery is a black and green car where the front half is green and the rear half is black. For this weekend, they had a black and green car where the front half is green and the rear half is black. But this time, the green bit was kind of like paint splatters. Just stop. Sauber, just don't bother. No one cares. It didn't look any different. No one cares. We had RB came dressed as one of the special flavored Red Bulls. They came all in pink. The pink and sort of teal is the color palette of Miami. And I guess RB came to honor that and get in on the vibe. So any of you who drink Red Bull have like been to a shop have probably seen that Red Bull come in all like the, the monoblock cans. So they're called like, the red edition and the blue edition. I know Mrs. V, my partner, does love a Red Bull. I want to say her favorites, other than just like a standard sugar-free, would have to be I think it's called Blue Edition, but the one that's Juneberry flavored in the UK, or recently Ruby Edition, which is spiced pear, which I have not tried, but I'm told is very good. I actually, bizarrely, quite like the white one, the coconut one. It's strange, but I do enjoy it. Anyway, I know there's a pink one. I couldn't tell you what flavor it is. I know one of them is like cactus flavor. Maybe it's that. Like cactus flower, not cactus. Not like, it doesn't jam spikes into your mouth. Honestly, I wish it would compared to some Red Bull flavors. I'm not a fan. Anyway, they came as the pink can, so full pink car. They even had their wheel covers as like the top of the can. It's very campy. It's fun. I like it. It's stupid. All for it. And then the other special livery for this weekend, Mercedes had some special race suits, but they didn't actually change the cars. They had like a sort of orangey pink suit. It was quite nice. It was actually really nice, to be fair. The other special livery for this weekend that didn't cause any controversy at all was Ferrari, back with their big HP sponsorship, same as they did last year in Miami. And it was so popular last year when they put all the blue stuff on the car, they decided they would make it even worse. Obviously, Ferrari massively derided at the start of this year for the prominent blue circles on the car for HP, when they could have, done like a monocolor black HP logo or a white one. They just fully leaned into it. And so, like, they released this livery. For those of you audio only, they released this livery where the full rear half of the car from the roll hoop backwards effectively were kind of like sitting on top of the side pods. So the top rear of the car was all blue. And then the rear wing was like blue and white split down the middle, like left and right split. Jesus. No. I'm all here for trying stuff out. I'm all here for a bit of artistic experimentation. Don't do that. Ferrari, don't do this ever again. I implore you. Never ever pick up the blue paint can again. You are not allowed. This was vile. This is just a horrible mismatch. If they'd done the whole car blue and white, I would have been here for it. And they did blue and white overalls. They looked like they'd stolen some Williams overalls. There was not a hint of red on these overalls. And yet, sadly, it feels wrong to say this, there was too much red on the car. If the whole car had been white and blue, very like bold color contrast, I think it could have worked. I think people could have got on board with it. This was a crime, a graphic design crime. So anyway, enough of our pre-weekend rambling. We get to the weekend. We get to on-track action here in Miami. It is a sprint weekend, one of 6 this year. I think all on the same weekends as last year. Unimportant. It was a sprint weekend, which obviously means different format for the weekend. For those of you uninitiated, we have 1 practice session as opposed to the 3 as we normally do. And then sprint qualifying on a Friday, sprint Saturday, sort of morning, afternoon, then qualifying, then the race. So less practice, more on-track action. In previous installments, not always that thrilling because it's just kind of lots of the same thing. But we got a lot of variety this weekend. We had a wet or partially wet sprint, but 2 dry qualifying sessions and actually a fully dry Grand Prix on the Sunday. There were threats of a race, but they never fully materialized. But we start the weekend sprint qualifying. As always, sprint qualifying SQ1 is such a chaotic session. I personally feel like sprint qualifying needs to be a bit rejigged. So obviously it's shorter session times than normal qualifying. Normal qualifying is 18, 15, 12 minutes for Q1, 2, 3. Sprint qualifying, on the other hand, is 12, 10, 8. Really quick sessions. And having a 12-minute session for SQ1 with 20 cars on track just means the amount of traffic and cars bunching up, impeding, it's just horrendous clusterfuckery is off the charts. And it was once again, we just had an SQ1 session with all people going all everywhere. We had shots of Lance Stroll on a push lap, having to go around people on the main straight because he was a bit out of sync. just honestly nightmarish session. I personally feel like sprint qualifying should be changed in some way. Like, they have the mandatory tyre thing, so you get one set of mediums for SQ1, and so your second push lap is on the same set of tyres as the first one. You can't make any changes with tyre strategy, and you have to keep them in a good place, and if you lock up, then you get a bit screwed, that kind of thing. And they make them shorter sessions to ramp up the pressure, but ultimately, it's exactly the same as normal qualifying. Watching this one, had a very strong feeling that I would change sprint qualifying format to just something else. I still maintain Formula E style sprint shootout or shootout qualifying. So just have like one big session, give them 15 minutes, they all go out, it sets an order, and then the top 8 go to a head-to-head bracket style thing. Head-to-head shootout qualifying. Cool. It's different. It's another reason to watch sprint qualifying, because why would I watch sprint qualifying if I'm also going to watch regular qualifying? It's the same thing, but shorter and less important. Ugh. So yeah, not fantastic. A couple things from that. We had Mr. Jackery Doohan getting very, very unhappy with the Alpine team, seeming to suggest that the Alpine team were making silly mistakes in their organization and on-track strategy. That's very unlike Alpine things. So yeah, basically, we have the first banker laps of SQ1. Jack Doohan doesn't have a fantastic lap, so he's down in the bottom 5 in the drop zone. Pierre Gasly is much safer. He's up around the sort of P10 mark. We then get to the point where everyone's trying to come out for their second flying lap in SQ1, all around the kind of like 2.5 minute mark, 3 minute mark, that kind of thing. And obviously every team is trying to go at the same time. Alpine elects to send both Gasly and Doohan out of their garages simultaneously, side by side. But Gasly, being the one who's like closer to pit exit, means he's ahead effectively. And so Doohan comes out of his garage, tries to turn, but then Gasly, and specifically Gasly's engineer, the guy who steps out of the garage and like waves them out, is stood there. And so Jack Doohan can't turn out of his garage with the same steering lock he normally would, and then can't get out of his garage because he gets kind of like stuck up against the pit wall, because Formula 1 cars are huge compared to the width of a pit lane. And so he gets stuck. The team has to like rush out, push him back, put him on, and then he's back of the pack for going out in SQ1. Doesn't get around to the line, doesn't get to do another flying lap, and is understandably very unhappy, particularly seeing that Pierre Gasly had some pace in that car. Gasly went on to get P13 in sprint qualifying, so it wasn't like that far ahead, but Doohan ends up P17. And yeah, it just silly stuff. We had, 2 weeks ago, an Alpine sent Gasly out with a tyre blanket still on his car. And now they send their cars out of the garage in such a way that they block each other and cause a traffic jam of their own two vehicles. This is just basic, stupid stuff. If this was like a new team who's still having teething problems figuring out their procedures for all things on track, I would understand. This team has been in Formula 1 for decades. Some people have been working at Enstone probably longer than half the teams on the grid have existed. There's probably some people at Enstone who've been there since like the 90s. There's people in the team who know how to manage qualifying sessions. They know not to send your two cars out side by side because they can't turn. There's people in the team who know these things. Why? The Alpine continuously get stuff like this wrong. It's just ludicrous. So anyway, I'm on Jack Doohan's side in that one, but I will say Jack Doohan, I was praising him in the first few weekends this year, but he's settling into having not a fantastic year, quite frankly, and no, maybe I'm being harsh. He did out-qualify Gasly in full qualifying. Gasly had a bit of a shocker, but still. Yeah, just stupid stuff. The other one I wanted to mention, not actually from sprint qualifying, but from practice one, is the Zach Brown tyre water bottle. You may have seen a meme picture of Zach Brown, just with a water bottle with some like stickers on it that said tyre water. Some of you may know what this is about, but for some of you who don't follow the Formula 1 news in too much detail, don't get down in the weeds of everything Christian Horner says, like sadly I have to. This is a reference to kind of an ongoing thing that's been happening since at least the middle of last year, but probably has been rumbling on, I would say, since 2023 at this point. Some accusations, effectively, by Red Bull in particular, by Christian Horner's organization, that McLaren have some less than legal tire cooling techniques. So obviously, tire management is key in Formula One. The tires are the part of the car that touch the road, and so you can only go as fast as your tires have grip. Like if your tires have no grip, it doesn't matter how much horsepower you have, it doesn't matter how good the driver is. If you're driving on butter, melty, greasy Teflon surfaces, then you can't do anything. Whereas if you can keep your tires in a good temperature window, they have significantly more grip, and therefore your car goes faster. And well, McLaren's been going pretty fast recently, and they've been very good at time management throughout the race, being able to set like very consistent lap times throughout a stint, as opposed to other drivers who maybe have to save for the first half of a stint to keep their tires in a window, that kind of thing. So there's been speculation that McLaren have some novel and, if you ask Red Bull, illegal tire cooling techniques. And lots of this talk, this rumor, centered around rear tire water, the rear tires being filled with water. That was like the first theory that was leaked out to the wider press and Formula One media. So it's the same thing. There was physically water in the tire, between the rim and the tire, the bit that should be filled with air. There was some water in there. There were rumors that when Pirelli were given the tires back and they take the tires off the rim to, disassemble them, the water fell out of the tire rim. This has been disproved. Pirelli said no, that didn't happen. But I guess theories continue that McLaren have something going on within the wheel structure. So if you see in the garages when a Formula One car has its wheel taken off, and it kind of just looks like this big smooth drum thing, it is the same as a road car. So the outer section that you can see, the big shiny carbon fiber bowl, is basically the brake disc housing. It's a cover that sits between the brake disc and the wheel. That's it, end of sentence. But inside that, it's the same as a normal road car. There is a brake disc, there's brake calipers, there's obviously the axle that the wheel is attached to, screwed onto with a wheel nut. It's the same as a road car, just in slightly different shapes. There's some speculation that within the McLaren wheel brake cover, there's something going on that keeps their tyres very cold. Some news came out this week from the Red Bull organization, I don't know how directly, that apparently Red Bull have been using thermal imagery in the pit lane to look at various teams' brake and wheel housing temperatures when they come into pit stops during the race. Firstly, when I heard this, my initial reaction was, are you allowed to do that? Are you allowed to point thermal cameras at opposing teams? I had a weird suspicion that was illegal. I've looked it up. I don't think it is. There were some rules a couple years ago about having 3D scanning equipment in the pit lane, and basically you can't have any 3D scanning equipment because one could imagine with handheld 3D scanners, you could set up a system in your pit booth that when an opponent car drives past to come to their pit box or coming out of their pit box, you would just scan the car and you could get quite an accurate topology of their front wing, side pods, etc., etc. That got banned. But obviously you're still allowed to have cameras and people, and Formula One may well employ spies. They may employ people who go and sit in the grandstands of cameras at certain corners to get certain angles of competitor cars, because there's nothing stopping them from doing that. But apparently Red Bull have been using thermal cameras to look at how hot people's wheels are getting when they come in for their pit stops. And they claim that the average team, when they come and remove a wheel, they can see their brake drum assembly is very red and orange. But on the McLaren team, they claim there were multiple blue spots, i.e. cold spots, around particularly the brake venting in that thing. And they suggest that it's not possible to get the brake housing to be that cold in the middle of a race without some kind of other cooling system, some kind of pumped fluid cooling system. They say it's not possible with air cooling. So I think Zach Brown was doing this as a bit of a jab at Red Bull, saying go on, prove it. If you think we're doing something, the whole tire water thing from last year turned out to be completely false. So this is Zach Brown kind of having a bit of a jest, having a bit of a jab, saying go on then, if you think we're doing something wrong, figure it out and prove it. I get the feeling McLaren are doing something. Not going to say whether it's illegal or not, because I don't know what it is, and I haven't studied the rules about brake cooling. I read the technical documents about 6 months. It's a big list of documents, all right? I haven't remembered it in fine detail. I do get the feeling that McLaren is doing something. I think they have something inside the wheel assemblies that's making their tyre management a lot easier for the drivers. This may come up again later in the year as a big storyline. Maybe it would be found that McLaren's doing something illegal. And Formula 1 teams are always doing illegal stuff. Let's not pretend that this is some mega scandal. Every Formula 1 team is probably doing something illegal. But really, it's only illegal once you get caught. Because if you don't get caught, well, then you're just smart. You just found something new to do. So I do believe McLaren's doing something. Will we ever discover what it is? I don't know. Will it turn out to be highly illegal? I don't know. I think unlikely, honestly. As with many things that are not aero developments in the sport, it may well be the case that other teams just kind of figure it out and start doing it themselves to varying levels of success, and then the sport kind of carries on. Obviously, lots of the development talk in Formula 1 is centered around aero development, because that's what you can see. As a person watching the sport, you can see when there's changes to the front wing or to the shape of the sideboards or the rear wing. Don't forget, that is not the only thing that gives a Formula 1 car a competitive advantage, and that is not the only thing the team is working on designing. Every aspect of this car, from novel systems, be that, famous examples like the F-duct back in the day, or exhaust-blown diffusers, or the DAS system on the Mercedes, whether it be completely novel systems, whether it be just technical advancements to things you can't see, so the internal working of suspension, maybe you have some new overall philosophy for suspension spring. They're not springs in the Formula 1 car, but you know what I mean. That kind of thing. Even it could just be packaging. I remember a couple of years ago hearing about how one team in particular had started packaging their ECUs in the floor, in the cape of the floor, which sounds thoroughly boring. It doesn't make an exciting news story, does it? DAS steering, pulling the wheel and making the toe of the front tires change is cool and you can see it happen, but it's yes, I've heard that this team has packaged their ECU almost 20 millimeters lower in the Z-axis. Wow. It's not a thrilling news story, is it? But there's lots of stuff like this going on, and all the time teams are trying to figure out what the other teams are doing, and sometimes they do figure it out and then they do it and then they get the same boost. So there's loads of stuff like this happening. It's not just on aero. Maybe another team will figure out how McLaren keep their tyres so cold. Maybe it's just Oscar Piastri's Iceman persona that radiates out and refrigerates the tyres. I don't know. But they are certainly very good at time management. My God, I just realized that was one hell of a tangent for still being in sprint qualifying. I guess the only other thing to talk about in sprint qualifying is our pole, or not pole, I was about to make that as a point, our P1 in sprint qualifying, Kimi Antonelli. So Mercedes were quickest in all three sprint qualifying sessions. I want to say Russell was quickest in SQ1 and 2. You're certainly quickest in SQ1. I actually forget who it was in SQ2. But then, not quite out of nowhere, he was going very well, but right at the end of SQ3, Timothy Antonelli puts in a banger, a certified banger from Andrea. Puts that thing on pole position, 0.054, I want to say, ahead of Oscar Piastri. But, P1 is P1, is a hell of an achievement at just 18 years old. One point I would like to add on this, though. I saw some stats and some graphics being thrown around by Formula 1 and various media outlets calling Kimi Antonelli the youngest pole sitter in any format. What does that mean? There's only one format you can be the pole sitter. It's the Grand Prix. If you're not on pole position in the Grand Prix, you don't have a career pole position. So I can understand it. I understand I always like to call it the NFLization. The kind of easily digestible consumerification of the sport and just like huge numbers of stats. Kimi Antonelli, youngest person to do this. Very cool. Youngest person to lead a lap. Interesting. Cool stat. He is not the youngest person to get a pole position because getting the quickest time in sprint qualifying is not a pole position. You can only have a career pole position if you're on pole position in the Grand Prix. Technically, even going fastest in regular qualifying on a Saturday afternoon is not a pole position. Pole position is starting at the front of the grid for the Grand Prix, because if you go fastest in qualifying but then get a penalty, you are not on pole position. Lots of people don't seem to know this, and they think that just whoever is quickest in qualifying, that's a career pole position. No. Pole position is starting at the front of the Grand Prix by whatever means that may be. Obviously, 97% of the time, it's the person who went quickest in qualifying. But there are penalties. There's other circumstances. You might have a DNS. You might crash on the lap to the grid, whatever. And so pole position means starting first in the Grand Prix. Sprints are not a real thing. Sprints are not a Grand Prix. They are not a race. If you win the sprint, you do not have a career win. You are not a Grand Prix winner. And if you start at the front of the sprint, you do not have a career pole position in Formula 1. And so very impressive by Kimi Antonelli. He does not have a pole position, and he is not the youngest driver to ever have one. He can still do that, I believe, if he has a good qualifying lap in the next few races. But he currently is not the youngest ever pole sitter in Formula 1. I don't like this in all formats. Because what the hell does that mean? Is practice a format? Is going quickest in practice a pole position in a format? What do you mean in all formats? Is going for a jog around the track on Thursday afternoon a format? What are the formats? So anyway... not to be a stickler for the rules, but I absolutely am going to be a stickler for the rules here. I'm a stats nerd. Don't mess with my stats. So we get up to the sprint race on Saturday morning. Kimi Antonelli does line up in P1. Alongside him, Oscar Piastri. Behind them, Norris P3, Verstappen P4, Russell P5. Blah, blah, blah. Some other headlines from that qualifying. We had Alex Albon went very well, got up into P8, but actually in interviews said that he was expecting the car to go even better. He thought he could go higher than P8. He thought he could be ahead of those Ferraris. Sainz, on the other hand, had a bit of a wobbly, SQ2, and so goes out P15. But Nat Williams had good pace here in Miami. Williams has been looking good all season, obviously, but I would say in Miami they seem to have taken another step on, and a very convincing step on, where they are like firmly one of the top 5 teams now, and actually for lots of this weekend looked faster than Ferrari. So very impressive. We also had Fernando Alonso qualifying P10 for the sprint race. Alonso still at 0 points so far in 2025. People are wondering whether this season may just be cursed for Fernando, whether he's ever going to get those points. But he qualifies P10 and actually right at the start of the sprint manages to get up into P8 on the first lap. And so it looks like Alonso about to break his points curse for this year. We shall come back to that one in a second. But one of the key points from the sprint race, turn 1, Oscar Piastri on Kimi Antonelli. Oscar Piastri gets a slightly better launch. And so as they get to turn 1, they are effectively side by side. I'm not going to go into any discussion about, in air quotes, being ahead at the apex, or owning the corner, or, significantly alongside. I hate it. I want it to go away. But the fact of the matter is, both drivers got to turn 1 pretty side by side, very close together. Kimi Antonelli came in to almost like try and squeeze Oscar to the apex, but Oscar just drove in a straight line, so it didn't really work. And so both of them drove to the outside of turn 1, and Kimi Antonelli ends up on the runoff, obviously bad traction, and gets dropped down into P4, I want to say, or maybe even P5 behind Verstappen and... No, P4. I'm not interested in analysing this fight. It's, once again, a non-issue. It's standard lap 1 stuff. Oscar, as we've seen in recent races, is formidable in wheel-to-wheel racing. I would say, well, definitely the better of the 2 McLaren drivers in wheel-to-wheel racing. Probably one of the best on the grid currently, because he just has a very collected approach towards fighting other drivers, I would say very reminiscent of Max Verstappen, quite honestly. Aggressive when he needs to be, pulls back when he needs to be. He just has the capacity to understand how fights are progressing and when to pick his battles. And so, not the easiest driver to go up against in turn 1. Antonelli, in that moment, looked inexperienced, tried to squeeze him, didn't work, got bounced out, went over the runoff. It looked like someone new to Formula 1 going up against someone experienced in Formula 1, which is what it was. And so it's a learning point for Kimi Antonelli. He started at the front of the grid for the first time in his career. I am confident this will not be his last time starting at the front of the grid. So he can learn from this. He can take this into the future. He can, convert his next pole position into maybe something better. He'll be fine. As always, we shall watch his career with great interest. But that means that Oscar Piastri sneaks up into the lead of this sprint race with teammate Lando Norris behind him, and then basically they just shoot off into the distance. Ain't nobody had pace anywhere near these McLarens this weekend. They were just so fast. If anything, they may have been holding back on pace because they so comfortably just the two fastest cars this weekend. So yeah, they were just gone. Easy 1-2 for McLaren, which basically meant it's just a squabble between the people behind, between Verstappen, Antonelli, Russell. Not so much the two Ferraris, though, kind of struggling on race pace, particularly in this first stint in the rain for Lewis Hamilton. Oh yes, and I completely forgot to mention, Charles Leclerc, nowhere to be seen in the sprint because on the reconnaissance lap, as it's known, the lap to the grid, the one that's like half an hour before the race, not the formation lap, the one where they go and then park on the grid and then the engineers come out. That one. Charles Leclerc hit the wall, binned it. He says the aquaplanes, so it was raining quite significantly at this point in time. Charles Leclerc comes out on intermediate tyres, but even at that time, at least on the Sky coverage, we had the commentators saying how the rain had picked up significantly just at this point that all the drivers are coming out of the pits on inters, discussing whether actually it was wet weather conditions. And then Charles Leclerc immediately proved that they were correct by aquaplaning down the bendy back straight of Miami, hitting the wall and tearing two of the wheels off his car. And so Charles Leclerc very much gets a DNS for the sprint race. I think on the official Formula 1 website, for some reason, he was given a DNF. Let me just check. I've got it open here. Sprint. Charles Leclerc. DNF. No, DNS, certainly. He did not get anywhere near the start of that race. Hit the wall. So we then had all the cars come back around. We actually had a double formation lap, I want to say. So Charles Leclerc hits the wall. His car's obviously recovered. This was a reconnaissance lap anyway. When it comes time to start the race, we have a formation lap behind the safety car, and it was still very wet. Lots of spray, lots of drivers complaining on the radio that they can't see a thing. So we have a double formation lap behind the safety car in the hopes that maybe the throwing of the water by the intermediate tyres would throw water away and create a sort of dry line to start the race on. No. So we have a double formation lap, and then we have effectively an aborted start, but it's thrown as a red flag because, as it was pointed out in the coverage, if you do a double formation lap, the second one is actually just lap 1. Effectively, you have a rolling start at that point. They can choose to turn that into a standing start for the start of lap 2, but it is lap 1 because the cars are only fueled for so many laps, and so you have to start counting them down. So we have a red flag, effectively an aborted start, and we come back about half an hour later, and we do the same thing. We come out and we have 2 formation laps, a double formation lap, just to check this track is dry because it had been very wet earlier in the day on Saturday. And then we do line up to the grid to eventually start the sprint race half an hour late, but with no Charles Leclerc. The one other point I'd like to make on this as well, the first lap of the race was lap 4. We had a formation lap and then 3 extra formation laps, which should have been laps 1, 2, and 3. And therefore, the first racing lap was lap 4, but we started it on lap 3. And so effectively, we gained a lap, and the sprint race was 1 lap longer than it was originally scheduled for. I don't believe any cars would have been refueled during that red flag period. So that means that everyone had to do the entire sprint 1 lap underfueled. Obviously, underfueled is a competitive advantage for anyone who's watched my streams, and that's what you'd want to be doing anyway. And you do burn less fuel in the rain. So for the first half of the sprint, it was very wet, and you would use less fuel on those laps because you're more cautious on the throttle coming through a corner. You're not full throttle at times that you would be in the dry, and so you just use less fuel. So it's kind of a non-issue, but I would still very much ask that Formula One sort their shit out when it comes to all things timing, race organization, figuring out which lap we're on, all these kinds of things. We started on lap 4. You did too many laps in the sprint, Formula One. Anyway, so going through the sprint race, the first half of it, when it was wet, was thoroughly very boring. Nothing happened, like at all. we got in this running order of Piastri, Norris, Verstappen, Antonelli. Just everyone was just separated. No one was doing anything. So yeah, very boring race, saved by the fact that we had a bit of a changeover from wet into dry. So Yuki Tsunoda, who started the sprint race, I didn't even mention, Yuki Tsunoda qualified technically P18, and then the team elected to brake park firm. They changed some of the components on his car, and so he started from the pit lane, but we had all these weird rolling formation starts, so he was just, it didn't make any difference really. Anyway, Yuki Tsunoda effectively started P20, but then Leclerc crashed to P19. He was right at the back of the sprint race. And so as the track was starting to dry, they bring Tsunoda in to be the first guinea pig to swap onto mediums. Turns out very quick. And so we also get a huge rush of people coming in to swap their inters out for dry tires for the last kind of 8 laps of this sprint race. We have our first kind of incident of the race, an unsafe release by Red Bull of Max Verstappen into the path of Kimi Antonelli. So Red Bull and Mercedes have the garages next door to each other. Max was ahead in the race, but the Mercedes garage is after the Red Bull one. So Max comes in, does his pit stop, and then as he's leaving his pit box, Kimi Antonelli is coming down the pit lane and is level with the Red Bull pit lane, obviously about to turn into his pit box. Red Bull completely open shut case, no arguing this one, unsafe release, just release Max Verstappen into the path of Kimi Antonelli, but did it in such a place, it's not like Kimi Antonelli had to stop, slam the brakes on, let Verstappen go past, and then had a delayed pit stop. No, happened at such a time that Kimi Antonelli collided with Max Verstappen. It broke Verstappen's front wing, but Antonelli had to bounce back out and not do his pit stop. So Antonelli was effectively given a drive-through penalty by the Red Bull organization. And I thought this was kind of an interesting one because the stewards reviewed this, didn't take them long because there's no question about this was a penalty. Max Verstappen gets a 10-second penalty for this incident, but I know in theory the penalty for something should be unrelated to the outcome. We always hear this in Formula One. It's they don't look at the outcome of an incident. It's just the straight details of an incident, unsafe release is an unsafe release, it's 10 seconds. But I would say there's different levels of unsafe release, and so if you make a release that physically stops a competitor from pitting, doesn't delay them, stops them from pitting, and so Antonelli had to not pit, come out of the pits, go around, and then pit again, drive-through penalty for Kimi Antonelli, I feel like that should be a heftier penalty for Red Bull because he got 10 seconds, but basically finished ahead of Antonelli. No, he finishes behind him because we finished under the safety car, and so the entire grid was bunched up, and Verstappen is effectively at the back of that thing with 10 seconds. He's behind all these train of cars. But if we had finished in open racing, Verstappen on the road was actually multiple places ahead of Kimi Antonelli, and 10 seconds means he may have still been ahead of Kimi Antonelli, and so I'm slightly curious whether that should have a harsher penalty, because you could imagine being very cynical, you could try something like this again. Let's say Antonelli or Russell is fighting Verstappen for the lead of a race. If you were kind of lucky enough to be in this position and smart enough to do it, they could pit, say, Yuki Tsunoda, accidentally give him a slow stop to hold him for the right position, and then accidentally give him an unsafe release into the path of, let's say, George Russell, blocking Russell from pitting and giving Russell a drive-through penalty, ensuring Max Verstappen would win the race. You could do that. Obviously, that would be similar to like Crashgate. It would be a huge cheating scandal. But you could do that, and the penalty for doing it, allegedly, is less than what you've given to the other driver. Like, we've had cases in the past that sometimes you cause a collision and you cause that person to DNF. I'm not saying that you should be disqualified for that. But I don't know, it just feels like a weird one, particularly because pit releasing is not on the driver. You could argue that the driver has a lot going on, it's high pressure, they're racing. This is a team, this is a man standing there with a button. He's not driving a car. He's just standing there, just looking, is the lane clear, and then pushes a button. Call me cynical. I feel like there should be a harsher penalty for getting that wrong. This is obviously not Red Bull's first issues with pit release this year. They had some technical difficulties with their lights. Don't know if this was related. I honestly haven't looked into this, and I'm not going to. But something's going on. Something's going on in the Red Bull pit team that they need to fix, because this is not good. Like, these are the kinds of issues that lose you races. And yeah, actually, Max Verstappen, to be honest, without this incident, could have finished P3 in this sprint. He finished on the road P4. He was overtaken by Lewis Hamilton, who got very good timing with his pit stop onto dries. And so kind of jumped up from where he was previously down in like P7. He got up into P4 and then overtook Verstappen into P3. So even on the road, Verstappen was P4, but you could make an argument that's because he only had half front wing, because it got cut off by his collision with Antonelli. So I think without that accident and without the 10-second penalty, Verstappen could have finished the sprint race P3. And so that's quite a significant, that's 6 points the Red Bull have lost there. That's more than the difference between P3 and P5. Like, that's a lot of points to be given up for a stupid like procedural error. And so Red Bull needs to be looking at this, because you cannot let 6 points slide like that. The other instance that happened in sprint race, Sainz crashed at turn 14, the entry to the like very awkward tight underpass chicane. Sainz crashes there, so it brings out kind of double wave yellows, but not a safety car. We then do get a safety car only a few laps before the end of the sprint race, as Alonso and Liam Lawson collide down at the exit of turn 11, entry of turn 12. This again, so basically Alonso and Lawson are fighting down into turn 11, which is at the end of the like bendy back straight. It's a hard left-hander, and then you have the long right-hander of turn 12. And so cars can keep fighting there. So if you're alongside going through turn 11, if you haven't quite made the move, it helps to keep it pinned, stay alongside, because you can still pass someone through turn 12. Which is what Lawson was trying to do. Alonso pushes him to the outside. So Lawson was fully off the track. And, you know, Alonso was pushing him, he was being tight, he was not leaving a lot of room. But Lawson, from off the track, then just drives into the side of Fernando Alonso, punts him, and then hits the wall on the outside of turn 12. And I saw some people in my Discord, and they were discussing whether Alonso squeezed him, whether racing room was given, whether Lawson was deserving of racing room. All of that goes fully out the window if you just drive into someone. Like, it doesn't matter who was where and who was ahead of the apex. If you drive into someone, and into the back of their car no less, from off the track, when you are off the track, you drive into the side of someone's car, you are in the wrong. There's no way around that. You can't punt people. Doesn't matter the situation. It's not like he was being brake checked. They're both accelerating. That would be slightly different. But you can't drive into the back of someone, particularly from off the racetrack. And so I don't care who was ahead of the apex. Lawson just punts Alonso. The stewards agree. Lawson picks up 1 penalty point for that. I honestly thought it might be 2. But Lawson picks up 1, which actually means he's on 6, which is not a small number. He's halfway to a race ban. And as I've said in previous podcasts, Lawson has just been sloppy. Since he's been like pushed back down to RB, he's been like getting there more and getting a bit calmer in that car and getting closer to Hadjar in qualifying. I think he was behind Hadjar in both qualifyings. He was. Isaac Hadjar actually just the epitome of consistency this weekend. I'll get onto that in a second. But Lawson was kind of like getting a bit cleaner, but still a sloppy season for Lawson. And this is another sloppy incident for Lawson. And yeah, like the penalty points reflect it. He's halfway to a race ban, 6 points out of 12. Liam, mate, come on. Jesus. So yeah, we get a safety car for that, and the safety car actually just ends the sprint race because unlike the Grand Prix, the sprint race can't go on forever because you have to then do qualifying afterwards, and so it kind of has to end. I think if that was in the Grand Prix, they might like try and red flag it and get 3 racing laps at the end, but no, fair enough. So it ends, which helps Lando Norris, who got very lucky with the timing of that safety car coming in for his pit. Without that safety car, Lando Norris probably would have finished like P3 or P4 even. We might have seen a Lewis Hamilton podium. Sorry, we might have seen a Lewis Hamilton like P2. So Lando kind of lucked out, picks up the sprint win, gets P1, and then is just locked in by the safety car at the end of the race. Oscar P2. We have Hamilton, 2 podiums and 2 sprints this year. I wanted to talk about that a little bit actually, because it seems like this Ferrari, it seems like Ferrari is definitely better over a short distance. It seems Ferrari, even in the races, we saw this in Jeddah, on some stints is very quick. And I think that's why they've been quick in the sprint races, is they can go fast on a stint. It seems that they much prefer some tyres than others, whereas someone like McLaren are just quick on every tyre compound. It seems that Ferrari has only figured out how to go fast on some of the tyre compounds, but when that lines up for them, like in a sprint race where you only use 1 tyre, they do have some good pace. And like in the second stints in Jeddah, once again, they did have good pace. So Hamilton was stuck after not a very good qualifying position, but come the end of the race, Max Verstappen had damage, and so it wasn't too hard to pass him. But Lewis Hamilton potentially was the fastest car on track at the end of the sprint before the safety car. When they get it working, this Ferrari does have pace, but I think it's kind of similar and the opposite to the McLaren case, where Ferrari has just god-awful tyre preservation, which is why they seem very incapable of getting it working for the entire course of a race. And also not very good in qualifying this year. They just don't seem very good at conditioning tyres for the start of a quali lap. I don't know if they're getting them, if they can't get them hot enough to start the quali lap. I don't know if they're overheating by the end of the quali lap. It seems like one of those two is the case. And so the tyres are spending less time in the window during their quali attempts, which is why they're really struggling, because the margins in qualifying are so close. We'll talk about big qualifying in a second. But yeah, and then also in the race, like Ferrari just doesn't seem to have the ability to keep their tyres going and drive quickly, in the same as the other top teams. But it seems that in these shorter stints, when like strategy gets thrown out the window by a safety car, that kind of thing, Ferrari is right up there, and they do have that pace, maybe even similar to McLaren, that people were predicting in preseason testing, but only for like 5 to 10 laps at a time. But sadly for Ferrari, the race is longer than that. So on to big qualifying, slightly less storylines in this, so just kind of skim through it. Out in Q1, we have Pierre Gasly, just had a stinker, goes out P20. We had Oliver Behrman P19, Lance Stroll P18, after finishing the sprint in P5, promoted up to P5 with Verstappen's penalty, of course, but still P6 on the road is not bad. Qualifies P18. Alonso P17, so that is just the pace of those Aston Martins. They're just slow. And then Hulkenberg P16, which means Bortoleto outqualifies his teammate. Doohan outqualifies his teammate, but whether that's Doohan going quick or Gasly going slow, I will leave up to you. Hint, it's Gasly going slow. Yeah, impressive for Bortoleto is my key takeaway there, because Hulkenberg has been solid. Hulkenberg almost scraped a point in the sprint race, P9, which is so tantalizing for the team that's currently P10 in the constructors. So that one hurts. And actually, Gasly did get that P8 in the sprint race and picks up 1 point, which was Alpine's only point for the weekend. But cast your mind back, Alpine and Sauber were tied on 6 points going into this weekend, whereas Alpine is now the clear P9 in the constructors, with 7 points. I said a few weeks ago that I think Alpine is actually the 5th fastest car. I don't think this anymore. I think Alpine is a very situational car. They are quick on some weekends, and particularly in the hands of Pierre Gasly, but it's a very inconsistent car. And so I do see them kind of finishing the year maybe P7, that kind of thing. Maybe they get into a fight with like RB for P. No, that would be for P7. So there you go. Or Haas, those kind of teams. But anyway, then we get to qualifying 2. We have Liam Lawson goes P15. Jack Doohan goes P14. Bortoleto P13. Hamilton goes P12. And then Hadjar goes P11, the last driver knocked out in Q2. But I wanted to say, that looks bad for Hamilton. Knocked out P12. But you may not have noticed, Hamilton was 0.05 seconds slower than Leclerc, less than 1/10 off Leclerc's time. But the margins are so tiny. The margins are so minuscule in qualifying this year that I don't even think it was 0.5. I think it's like 0.048. That's a crazy gap to have between teammates. But that means a P12 for Hamilton. Ludicrous. And it is, once again, I talked about it for the entire time last weekend, but it's so good to see such a tight qualifying because, yeah, the difference between going out in Q2 and getting up into Q3 being like less than 0.1 is insane. 0.1, we get desensitized to what 0.1 of a second is. And obviously with all the teams coming so close together, like the drivers are coached through all the corners. And so what's the point I'm trying to make here? I don't know. And so it is a big amount in Formula 1 terms, but at the same time, no, it's not. It's 0.1 of a second. It's the difference between like getting on throttle maybe a couple meters earlier on one corner exit for one of the 19 corners of this track. Like it's such fractional differences. It might be picking a braking spot that's like 4 meters further down the road going into turn 11. Like tiny differences make 0.1, or like fractional differences in where you pick your turn-in point for a certain corner. Ludicrously small differences. And so just such a great level of competition. But it's just wild. And it almost gets to a point, I'm not going to say that qualifying means nothing, but it is also so close that tiny differences like getting an accidental slipstream off some other car down one of the various straights, or even just a gust of wind could make like a difference in your qualifying position. So yeah, it's just great entertainment thoroughly. But yeah, sucks for Hamilton. He's the loser in all of this. Goes out in P12. And then we get to our top 10. So Tsunoda does get into Q3. He qualifies P10. We have Ocon P9. Well done to him, because that Haas was not looking fantastic this weekend. Can't lie. Leclerc P8. Albon P7. Sainz P6. So Williams side by side up in the top 10. And we see what Albon meant when he said he was disappointed with sprint qualifying, because P6 in a Williams, but also for both of them to go side by side, confirms that is not a fluke by Sainz. That is just inherent speed of that car. And so this is what I was saying, like, Williams have been looking good this year, but this was very much them like confirming they are making a case for themselves, like they are like kicking the door down to be one of the top teams once again. And you love to, there's something hits so good about seeing Williams being competitive, Williams racing Ferraris, McLaren's at the front of the grid. What is going on? Is this the 90s? What am I watching? We then have Russell P5. Piastri only goes P4. He maintains his record of never being more than 0.1 away from pole position, but once again, the margins were so minuscule that he was within 0.1 but still got P4 on the grid. We then have Kimi Antonelli could not repeat what he did in sprint qualifying. He could only qualify P3, but 2 places ahead of Russell. Very impressive, mind you. Lando Norris goes P2, and Max Verstappen, once again, just doing things that only Max Verstappen can do. Puts that Red Bull on pole position for this race. Had absolutely no right of being there, considering the pace of those McLarens in the sprint race, considering like what Mercedes were able to do in sprint qualifying, Verstappen had no business, once again, being on pole position. And the only factor that can explain this is just Max being one of the greatest of all time. And I kind of, if you watch the race, you would get this sense as well, particularly in the first half of this race when Max was fighting hard to keep the McLarens behind. Ultimately, he was not able to do that because they're just much faster over the course of an entire race. But in the first stint, Max actually got ahead and so was leading the race. And so both McLarens in turn had to try and get past him. And Max, even just be able to hold them up as long as he did in a car that is just inherently inferior. Max Verstappen has put up crazy numbers in Formula 1 in the last few years and in his career up until this point. But 2025, even if Max doesn't win a title this year, even if he doesn't win like any more races, this year for me is his audition tape for like greatest of all time status. Not like top 10, not top 5, but like greatest of all time status. Doing things like that, getting that pole position up against the competition he has in those McLarens, it should be impossible, quite honestly. And it's not like there are any mistakes from Piastri or Norris or Antonelli. They all had fantastic quali laps, but just Max Verstappen is on a level previously thought unattainable. That's the only way I can explain it. Maybe it's the energy of having a new child in the world. Maybe he just wanted to taste the tyre water up on the podium. I don't know. But for me, yeah, Max Verstappen this season is just on another level. I love watching it. So much respect for what he's able to do in that car. And just for keeping like some kind of semblance of a title fight going. Massive. We cannot overstate how impressive it is. And so we get to the meat of the weekend. We've merely had the amuse-bouche, or the various side dishes of our huge like 5-course meal, but we're now down to it. The steak, mac and cheese, big fat glass of wine. We are here for the main event of the weekend. The Miami Grand Prix, not the fake one on the Saturday that doesn't give a pole position, Antonelli. The real one. We start off Max Verstappen on pole and Lando Norris alongside, and we shuffled around the top 4. Piastri and Antonelli had their thing on Saturday. It's time for Norris and Verstappen. The 2024 rivalry once again for the first corner of the race. And once again, stuff happens. So F1 was relatively clean going through turn 1, but Lando certainly looked quicker than Verstappen off the line. And coming out of turn 1, these two cars were side by side with Norris on the right-hand side, so the side like closer to the stadium. It's kind of hard to explain. We then have a left-hander going into the long right-hander of turn 3. And through the left-hander of turn 2, Max Verstappen gets his car a bit wobbly. You see him like squirm. And so he drifts his car to the outside, which is therefore the inside of turn 3. Lando Norris, being immediately next to him, though, has to take avoiding action and steers off, goes onto the runoff on the inside of turn 3. And very much like Antonelli in the sprint race, then has to rejoin, but with the lack of grip, gets dropped down into P4 or 5, very similar to Antonelli. Not going to put any speculation whether this was intentional for Max Verstappen, but I think we can safely say there's some matchups, some head-to-heads for on-track action, where we can, at this point in time, quite safely assume ahead of time who's going to come out on top. If it's Verstappen versus Norris, Verstappen is going to get the better deal. If it's Piastri versus Antonelli, Piastri's going to get the better deal. And for me, that once again is the mark that separates a very good race-winning driver from a champion driver. That ability to go into any situation against anyone else and be like, I'm going to win this. No backing down, no questioning your own decisions, just full steam ahead, full balls to the wall, just go for it. Just putting your car wherever and having confidence that you are correct and you are going to win this battle. Which not every driver exhibits, but yeah, Max Verstappen clearly is one of the people who does do that. And so, whether intentional or not, Norris gets pushed to the outside of the track. Verstappen takes the clear lead of this race with Piastri behind him. We then get quite an interesting thing for the first few laps, almost the first 20 laps of this race. So we start out, we have Piastri in P2 trying to fight Max Verstappen, and Lando is a few places back. He has to now clear some Mercedes in order to get back into the title fight, which he does do, but it takes him the best part of like 10-15 laps to just even get up to P3. But in the meantime, we have a battle for P1 between Piastri and Verstappen. Now, it's not easy for Piastri. He's got the faster car, but it is Max Verstappen ahead. He's not just going to sail past him. They battle for a few laps, a bit of like back and forth, trying some different lines through turn one, through a few different places on the lap. But eventually, Piastri does get past Max Verstappen. And when he does do it, it's in quite a clinical pass where Verstappen has no chance of like getting back or continuing the fight. An interesting contrast then, because shortly after, Lando Norris also gets onto the back of Max Verstappen, and he too, in a faster car, is trying to get past the Red Bull. And herein, we see the difference between Norris and Piastri in how they passed Verstappen at the start of this race. Because it didn't look easy for Piastri, but then as soon as Norris started doing it, the Piastri one looked like a piece of cake. It looked like a walk in the park in comparison, because Norris could not get past Verstappen. I don't know if that's psychological in the way that Verstappen views Norris compared to how he views Piastri, but that would be based on something, previous experience, or if that's entirely within Norris and Piastri themselves. But yeah, much more of a struggle for Norris to get past Verstappen. He passed him a couple times, and then Verstappen gets the place back, coming down the main straight, the straight, as opposed to the bendy straight. Just a much harder time. And so Norris eventually does get past Max Verstappen on, I want to say, lap 19. But because it takes him so much longer, by the time he gets up into P2, Piastri has a 9-second lead. And so he's just clearly won this race already. Norris was quick, and don't get me wrong, once he was in free air, Norris looked like he had the better race pace of the two. We don't know whether Piastri was just saving because he was just in the lead the entire time. So why push full pace? You could just keep your tyres in a good place in case you do have to fight later. But Norris did have the quicker laps from this point onwards, but like a 9-second lead, it's like, bro, it's done. It is done. Give the trophy to Piastri. And this is really the thing this year, because we have the teammate battle between Norris and Piastri, but they're not the only two cars on track, and it's close enough at the front where the two McLarens are the two clearly fastest cars, but other cars are close enough that they can, get ahead in qualifying, get ahead on the first lap at the first corner. And so these two McLarens are going to have to make some overtakes if they want to be fighting each other, and Piastri is just markedly better at doing that. And so I think we're going to have multiple situations like this where both McLarens have to overtake someone, likely Max Verstappen again, and Piastri's just going to do it faster, and it's just going to be like multiple seconds up the road by the time they're technically 1 and 2 in a race. And that's just the difference. There's nothing to convince me at this point that Norris can actually challenge Piastri for this title. He has excellent pace. Norris is rapid. And his race pace, lots of time, is better than Piastri's. But everything else is better from Piastri. And sometimes his race pace is better too. And so I just can't see Norris challenging for the title overall. And this was just one of those times. It was just so much easier for Piastri. We then get through the rest of this race after the first 20 laps, and the fights between McLaren and Verstappen are done. There's actually not that much to talk about, and this race went into a bit of a lull. We get some storylines later on with the two Ferraris alongside each other on track. On a different strategy, because they start on different tyres. We basically have Leclerc ahead on hards, and in the second stint, Hamilton directly behind him on mediums. He'd started to come out of the pits to start his second stint quite a way back from Leclerc, but then caught up quite quickly to get onto the back of him. They had Albon ahead and Sainz behind in the middle of I'd say a Williams sandwich, but a sandwich is defined by its filling, not by the outer thing. The outer thing defines the category of sandwich, whether it's a sandwich or a sub or a burrito. The type of bread changes that. But it's named after the filling, so it's a Ferrari sandwich with a Williams wrap. And I guess Williams are most similar to like a hefty farmhouse loaf. So it's a very classic, like, British flowery sandwich with a big double hunk of Ferrari in the middle. Hopefully you can follow that analogy. Anyway, we have Williams, we have Albon, Leclerc, Hamilton, Sainz, and actually Antonelli in the mix. I think Albon got ahead of Antonelli, so actually Antonelli is the person ahead of Leclerc. And so Hamilton gets onto the back of Leclerc and is quite keen that he is faster and so should be let through, and spends several laps arguing with his team that they need to let him through, and the team giving the old classic, we'll get back to you, we are checking, blah, blah, blah. Eventually, they do give the call to Leclerc to let him through. Leclerc has been uninvolved in all of this at this point. It's not like he was arguing back on the radio. The first time they radioed Leclerc and said, let Hamilton through, he was like, yep, just did it. But then Hamilton gets through and actually is not faster than Leclerc. Maybe he overheated his tyres while being behind him for 3 or 4 laps. Don't know. But then we just get the exact same thing in reverse immediately, with Leclerc complaining about Hamilton in front of him, asking to swap back again. And so they do swap back. And understandably, through the entire time, probably Leclerc to an extent, but certainly Lewis Hamilton, very, very annoyed with the Ferrari team. And it seems like Lewis is going off a cliff quite quickly when it turns to his relationship with the race engineers at Ferrari. Because he's just having none of it, understandable, because it's just nonsense. Ultimately, they end up making lots of the same decisions as other teams, but Ferrari is categorized by making decisions a little bit slower than other teams and being so much more antagonistic to their drivers. The way that they operate the radio, all the "we are checking," all the unhelpful comments, all the non-existent or poor communication. And clearly, Lewis Hamilton is already at the end of his patience. It's been 6 races. It's a quarter of the year. So this is going to be an interesting one to watch. Do we see some kind of Lewis Hamilton mutiny? Is he going to ask to have a race engineer swap? I thoroughly wouldn't be surprised if that happened. It's one to watch. It's one to watch within the Ferrari garage. Other things in the race, honestly, not much. After the first one, it actually wasn't a particularly good race. Exciting weekend, lots of stuff happening, but not a fantastic weekend. We had Carlos Sainz on the very last lap. So he was on the back of Hamilton and then Leclerc after they swapped, and then Hamilton again, trying to fight them, trying to get in there, but not quite able to make anything. Obviously got desperate. And so on the very last lap, on effectively the last corner, turn 17, the hairpin at the end of the long straight. There's 2 cons after that, but you're not going to make a pass there. Carlos Sainz made a lunge on Lewis Hamilton just right before the flag. My God, Carlos, mate, that was a bad lunge. Just absolutely dive bombed him. Got there so late as Lewis Hamilton was turning through the corner. Almost took both cars out. Quite frankly, could have easily taken a wheel off one or both of those cars. That was just a straight up bad move by Carlos. I haven't seen any documents to suggest that he got any kind of investigation for that. But, Jesus, that was a bad move, man. So that stuck out to me. But other than that, it was quite a tame end to this race. Exciting in the middle 4 times, but a tame end to the race. I guess other things to mention, we had a lap 1 collision between Doohan and Liam Lawson, which put Doohan out the race and also damaged Lawson's car. Lawson continued for most of the race, but did retire later on. He had a hole in his side pod and he was way down out of the point. So I guess they just, if you retire the car, you get some benefits in terms of more resources. So those guys both retired. Ollie Behrman had his engine partially explode and just cut out. And then Gabriel Bortoleto, I was about to say Gabriel Bortoleto, but my mouth refused. Bortoleto, on the same lap that Behrman had his engine cut out, also was complaining about engine issues. Obviously, both Haas and Sauber, Ferrari customer teams, not too encouraging for the Ferrari power unit if we have 2 cutting out at the exact same time in this race. Could just be a coincidence, but I would be nervous if I worked for the Ferrari engine team currently seeing that. So I'm assuming they'll be looking into that, what happened, and they'll probably bring some fix in. But yeah, not great. Bit sketchy for Ferrari, that one. So yeah, it turns out to be not a particularly good race for rookies finishing. We have a DNF from Doohan, Behrman, Bortoleto, and Liam Lawson. Hadjar, though, and Antonelli both do finish. Hadjar just misses out on points in P11, but I will say, Mr. Isaac, the model of consistency this weekend. Sprint qualifying, P9. Sprint race, P10. Qualifying, P11. Race, P11. Like, it's reminiscent, honestly, of Yuki Tsunoda from a couple years ago and other drivers who have found themselves in not fantastic cars, but just getting the absolute most out of it. Like, we have basically a clear top 5 now. And actually, the 10 points paying positions were just both McLarens, both Mercedes, both Red Bulls, both Ferraris, and both Williams. So we've got 5 teams in the top 10, locking out the top 10. Hard to get in there. Isaac Hadjar, though, very much making a case for himself as best of the rest. Almost scored a point. Yuki Tsunoda had a 5-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane. The classic where, you want to come into the pit lane and you want to slow down at the latest possible time to not waste any time. Yuki just got that bit wrong, ends up like skidding into the pit lane. Classic 5-second speeding in pit lane penalty. Finishes 5.2 seconds ahead of Isaac Hadjar at the flag. And so in classification, 0.2 ahead of Hadjar. But Hadjar almost snuck a little point off Yuki. Almost got in with the top 5 teams, the big boys, as it were, to score a point here. But yeah, super consistent. Him and Antonelli are, at this point in time, clearly the 2 best performing rookies this year. It honestly is a shame that Hadjar isn't in a faster car. It'd be interesting to see what he could do. I am not, to clarify, calling for him to be put into the Red Bull second seat. Do not do that to Isaac. He doesn't deserve that. He doesn't deserve that. That seat is cursed. Don't put him in there. Not this year anyway. Maybe we can have a discussion for 2026. Do not put Hadjar in that seat. But, in an alternate universe where he was, I don't know, Williams Driver Academy, it would be interesting to see him in a slightly faster car, what he could do with that thing. But yeah, finishing this race, Oscar Piastri, after he gets past Verstappen, he's just like clean in the lead of this thing. It's just no questions asked, just wins this thing quite comfortably. Norris P2. George Russell, who basically spent the entire race in P5, did his pit stop, just got kind of lucky with VSC timing. Didn't overtake anyone, wasn't overtaken by anyone. I think technically, like, Norris would have overtaken him on lap 1 after Norris dropped down, but for all intents and purposes, George Russell overtook no one, fell behind no one, just drove around in circles for loads of laps, started P5, ended in the same place, but the whole thing shifted around him, and so he just got P3. He just didn't do anything, he just got P3. So George Russell once again gets a podium for doing nothing. I am making light of it. Obviously, George Russell, incredibly consistent. To just be in that position to capitalize on, mistakes and capitalize on strategy opportunities like a safety car, you have to be consistent to be close enough to the front to be able to pick up chance podiums. But it's just so funny. He just keeps doing it. So yeah, George Russell gets P3. Max Verstappen P4, which he will probably be annoyed about. Verstappen could have definitely got a P3 in this race, but oh well. Alex Albon then picks up a P5 for Williams, which must be Williams' best finish since Belgium 2021, surely. Just doing a quick scan through my results document. Actually, no. Albon got P5 in Australia, so it's their best result since Australia, which in turn was their best result in many, many years since Belgium 2021, which, if you don't count that, is actually their best 2 results since... Oh my god, sorry, I'm scrolling a long way back. What race is that? Azerbaijan 2017. So yeah, ignoring the non-race that was Belgium 2021, Alex Albon has now given Williams their best 2 results in 8 years. Which is just crazy. And so, like, very much a resurgence for Williams. Love to see it. Nice to be up there. It's a shame it happened at a weekend where Ferrari stole their race suits, but, imitation is the highest form of flattery, so we take those. As I said, the actual race was not all that interesting. Some stuff happened, but not great stuff. So good qualifyings, interesting sprint race, slightly down race, but actually an okay weekend. Do I think we should still change the Miami track? Yes, because it's not good. And I've designed a whole new one, which the organizers can use whenever they want, as long as I get my baby alligator. But I think we're going to leave that there. I've been talking for quite a while in this bumper crop of news for the Miami Grand Prix weekend. We have a week break. We have a week off before our first European race of the year as we head to Imola for the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. That will be in 2 weeks' time. The podcast will return. I'll record something next weekend. I am moving apartments on the 14th of May, and so I'll record something for you, but I might be surrounded by boxes and shit, so I couldn't tell you exactly what. But we'll figure out something. Enjoy yourself on the lead up to Imola. Imola should once again be a nice close battle. Obviously, last year it was a close battle between Verstappen and Norris, and there's nothing to suggest that we won't get exactly the same thing again. But this time, it's also Mr. Antonelli's home race. And Mercedes seems to have a car that could go well around Imola. So if we could have a multi-car battle for the lead, Mr. Antonelli trying to get his maiden win at his home race, alongside Piastri on his dominant streak and Norris being also there, Imola is promising to be quite good from everything we see so far. So do not miss it. Join me back here for some off-week action next weekend. Until that time, though, I've been Mr. V. Now, Mr. C. I was about to make some pun about fake water and the sea. The C stands for cardboard. It didn't hit. Anyway, I'll catch you next time.